The wind held off the Atlantic, tearing at the warped window panes of the old Victorian house on Ocean Avenue in Kennebunkport, Maine. Amara Cole stood on the sagging porch on November 3, 2025. The salty air stung her cheeks, raw and red from the late fall chill, and the sky hung low, a bruised gray promising a nor'easter. At 28, Amara, a home health aide with Coastal Care, had seen her share of weathered homes across York County, crumbling farmhouses in Sanford, salt-eaten cottages in Ogunquit, but this one felt different. Its peeling paint and crooked shutters seemed to watch her, the house's silhouette against the crashing waves of Cape Porpoise Harbor like a figure hunched in wait. Her breath hitched as she pushed open the rusted gate, its screech slicing through the quiet like a scream. Her bag, heavy with medical supplies, bandages, syringes, a battered notebook, slapped against her hip as she stepped onto the porch, the boards groaning under her weight. Inside, the foyer was a mausoleum of forgotten things. Stacks of dusty books teetered on a mahogany table, their spines cracked and titles faded. A cracked mirror caught her reflection, her brown eyes wide with unease. A faded sepia photograph showed a young woman with piercing blue eyes, her gaze sharp enough to cut. The air was thick with mildew, undercut by a sharp, acrid scent, like burnt sage or something older, ritualistic. Amara's boots echoed on the hardwood as she called, "Ms. Grayson?" "It's Amara, from Coastal Care." Her voice felt small, swallowed by the house. A faint reply drifted from upstairs, "Up here, dear." The warmth in the voice was laced with an edge, as if the speaker feared waking something. Eleanor Grayson, 82, lay in a brass bed in a second-floor bedroom, her frail frame swallowed by a quilt that smelled of lavender and thyme. Her white hair fanned across the pillow, thin as spider silk, and her blue eyes, sharp as the ocean beyond the cliffs, tracked Amara's every move. "You're younger than the last one," Eleanor said, a faint smile curling her lips, though it didn't reach her eyes. Amara forced a grin, unpacking her equipment, thermometer, blood pressure cuff, a notebook for vitals. But the room was wrong. Despite the radiator's insistent hum, the air was so cold her breath fogged, her fingers aching as she fumbled with the cuff. She checked the window, expecting a draft, but it was sealed tight, the glass frosted despite the heat. Then, in the corner of her eye, a shadow flickered, too quick, too human-shaped to be a trick of light. Her heart lurched, a cold sweat prickling her neck, but when she turned, there was nothing but a bare wall, its wallpaper curling like dead skin. Over the next few days, Amara settled into a routine, arriving each morning at 8 a.m. to bathe Eleanor, administer her heart medication, and cook simple meals, oatmeal, broth, in the cramped kitchen overlooking the rocky shore. The house resisted her attempts at normalcy. The hallway lights flickered, even after she replaced the bulbs at the hardware store on Route 9. Her footsteps on the creaking floor seemed to echo with a second, softer tread, always a step behind. At night, when she stayed late to monitor Eleanor's erratic pulse, she heard scraping noises from under the bed, like fingernails dragging across wood, deliberate and slow. On November 5, she checked, her flashlight trembling in her hand, revealing only dust bunnies and a faint, acrid stench, like rotting meat just out of reach. Eleanor, awake in the dark, her eyes glinting in the moonlight, whispered, "Don't look too long, Amara. They don't like being seen." The words sent a shiver down Amara's spine, her pulse hammering as she backed away from the bed. Sleep became a battle. Amara's dreams were haunted by her mother, Lydia, who died alone in a Bangor hospice in March 2023. Amara had been 26, too angry at old wounds, Lydia's drinking, her sharp words, to visit her in those final months. The guilt was a stone in her chest, heavy and unyielding. Caring for Eleanor was her penance, a way to prove she could show up for someone, anyone. But Eleanor's cryptic warnings gnawed at her. On November 6, as Amara spooned broth into Eleanor's mouth, the old woman grabbed her wrist, her grip surprisingly strong, her nails digging into Amara's skin. "They're visitors," she rasped, eyes darting to an empty corner where the shadows seemed to pool unnaturally. They've been with me since '73. They don't leave. Amara's stomach twisted, her mind scrambling to blame dementia or morphine. But the air grew colder, the radiators hummed faltering, and she couldn't shake the feeling of unseen eyes boring into her. By November 7th, the shadows grew bolder. As Amara walked the long hallway to Eleanor's room, a silhouette darted across her peripheral vision, vanishing into the plaster wall. She froze, her pulse a drumbeat in her ears, and called, "Hello?" Her voice echoed, unanswered, but the air felt thick, like it was pressing back. Later, in the bathroom, she glimpsed a figure in the cracked mirror, a blurred, eyeless face, its mouth a dark slash. She spun around, heart in her throat, but the room was empty. Her hands shook as she sat in her car outside, the house looming in her rearview mirror, and Googled Eleanor Grayson on her phone. A 1973 Portland Press Herald article described Eleanor as a folklorist who studied Maine's ghost stories, tales of shipwrecks off Walker's Point, forgotten graves in Arundel's old cemeteries. The article mentioned a tragic incident at her Ocean Avenue home, but details were sparse, only noting the death of a young woman. Amara's curiosity burned, but fear coiled tighter in her gut. That night, unable to sleep, Amara found a leather-bound journal in Eleanor's bedside table, its pages yellowed and scrawled with spidery handwriting. It chronicled Eleanor's 1970s travels to Biddeford, Ogunquit, and York, collecting legends of restless spirits tied to the coast, sailors lost in storms, widows buried in unmarked graves. An entry from June 12, 1973, described a ritual in the basement of this house, meant to bind malevolent entities to protect Kennebunkport. The ritual went wrong, killing Eleanor's assistant, Clara Reed, a 22-year-old student from the University of Maine. Her blood sealed them, Eleanor wrote. I am their keeper now, and they hate me for it. Amara's hands trembled, the words blurring as she realized the shadows weren't hallucinations, they were real, and they were angry. On November 8, Eleanor was weaker, her breathing a shallow rattle. They know I'm fading, she whispered, her voice nearly lost in the storm battering the house, the windows rattling like loose teeth. They want you, Amara. You're strong, like I was. Amara recoiled, her mind flashing to the shadows, now lingering even in daylight, tall, featureless forms that pulsed with malice, their edges shimmering like heat waves. She tried to dismiss it, but the house was alive with their presence. A teacup slid across the kitchen table, clattering to the floor, a door slammed shut with no wind, the sound echoing like a gunshot. At night, the scraping under the bed became a low, guttural whisper, forming words she couldn't quite decipher but felt in her bones. UCS. You're ours. Desperate, Amara called her supervisor in Portland, begging for a replacement, but a nor'easter had closed Route 1, stranding her in Kennebunkport. She confided in Jamal Carter, a nurse and friend from Coastal Care, via video call. You're stressed, Amara, he said, his warm voice steady through the grainy screen. Old houses play tricks. Get some rest. But on November 9, Jamal drove from Saco to deliver supplies, his usual easy smile fading as he stepped into the foyer. He froze, staring at a shadow that flickered across the staircase, its form too sharp to be a trick of light. Amara, what the hell was that? He whispered, his dark eyes wide. He stayed only long enough to drop off the supplies, urging her to leave, but Amara couldn't abandon Eleanor, not when she was so close to death. That evening, Eleanor revealed the truth, her voice heavy with guilt. In 1973, she trapped spirits, souls of sailors drowned in an 1856 storm off Walker's Point, their ship, the Mary's Hope, shattered on the rocks. Twisted by rage and time, they haunted the coast, causing accidents and disappearances. Eleanor, then a respected folklorist, bound them to the house with a ritual, using talismans hidden in the basement, but Clara's death, her blood spilled on the stone circle, sealed the binding. Now, Eleanor's weakening body was loosening their chains, and the shadows sensed Amara's guilt over Lydia, seeing her as a new keeper, or a sacrifice. Eleanor taught her protections, lines of salt across doorways, a chant from the journal to ward off the spirits. But the shadows grew bolder, their cold touch brushing Amara's neck as she slept, their whispers weaving into nightmares of Lydia's face, her eyes accusing. You left me. On November 10th, Amara visited the Kennebunkport Library, a squat brick building on Main Street, seeking answers. The librarian, Margaret Hale, a wiry woman in her 60s with a penchant for local history, recognized Eleanor's name. She was a legend around here, Margaret said, pulling a dusty file. After 73, she stopped coming to town. People said her house was cursed. The file contained a grainy photo of Clara, smiling beside Eleanor, and a clipping about the Mary's Hope wreck, blamed on a freak storm. Margaret's eyes narrowed. You're staying in that house? Be careful. Folks say it's never empty. Amara left with a chill that wasn't from the wind, the file tucked under her arm. Back at the house, the shadows were relentless. They appeared openly now, standing at the foot of Eleanor's bed, their forms shimmering like oil slicks, their eyeless faces turned toward Amara. She found another journal entry, hidden in a locked drawer she pried open with a butter knife. Dated July 1, 1973, it described Clara's death, the ritual misfired, and Clara's blood anchored the spirits. They'll take anyone who sees them, Eleanor wrote. I can't undo it. Amara's dreams worsened, showing her trapped in the house, Lydia's voice echoing, You'll never leave. The shadows invaded her waking hours, their whispers forming her name, their cold fingers grazing her arms, leaving faint bruises. On November 11th, Eleanor, barely conscious, handed Amara a rusted key to the basement. Finish it, she rasped, her eyes feverish. Bind them, or they'll take you. Amara hesitated, her fear warring with her duty. She called Jamal, who returned despite his unease, bringing coffee and a flashlight. You don't have to do this alone, he said, but when a shadow lunged from the hallway, its form briefly taking Clara's face, he stumbled back, pale. I can't stay here, he admitted, guilt in his eyes as he left. Amara didn't blame him, she felt the house's weight too. That night, she descended the basement stairs, the air thick with damp earth and a metallic tang, like blood. The basement was a labyrinth of crates, old furniture, and cobwebs, lit by a flickering bulb that buzzed like a dying insect. At its center was a circle of stones, etched with symbols from the journal, surrounding a silver talisman that pulsed with a hum that vibrated in her teeth. The shadows surged, their forms coalescing into distorted faces, Clara's, Lydia's, the sailors, their mouths open in silent screams. They clawed at her mind, flooding it with guilt. You failed her. You'll fail Eleanor. Amara's knees buckled, her vision swimming, but she clung to the journal, chanting the ritual words as the shadow screamed, a sound like glass shattering in her skull. She placed the talisman in the circle, reciting the binding chant, her voice shaking but resolute. The shadows writhed, then collapsed into the talisman, the air warming, the hum fading to a whisper. Upstairs, Eleanor's breathing stopped, her face peaceful, free at last. On November 12th, the storm cleared, but Amara stayed, haunted by the talisman's faint pulse. She and Jamal sorted Eleanor's belongings, finding Clara's sketches in the attic, drawings of the shadows, their forms eerily like those Amara saw, with notes in Clara's handwriting, they see through you. Jamal urged her to destroy the talisman, but Amara couldn't, it was the only thing keeping the spirits bound. On November 13th, she returned to the library, showing Margaret the journal. The librarian paled, recounting a local legend. The Mary's Hope sailors were betrayed by a lighthouse keeper who dimmed the light, dooming them. Their rage never left, Margaret said. Eleanor thought she could control it. On November 14th, Amara stayed one last night in the house to finish paperwork, the talisman in her pocket. The silence was oppressive, broken by a faint knock from the basement. She froze, her breath shallow, but didn't go down. The talisman warmed in her hand, its hum louder. She drove to her Sacco apartment on November 15th, resuming work but changed. She kept the talisman in a locked drawer, its pulse a constant reminder. She was stronger now, her guilt over Lydia softening as she wrote to her estranged sister, Claire, in Bangor, hoping to mend their rift. On November 16th, as she checked on a new patient in Biddeford, she glimpsed a shadow in her car's rearview mirror, not in the house, but behind her, its eyeless face flickering. Her fingers closed around the talisman, now a permanent weight. The spirits were bound, but they were watching, waiting for her to falter, their whispers a faint echo in her mind, "We're still here."